Welcome into another edition of Mavs Latest. I'm Josyah Howard. Before we get it started, please subscribe down below. Leave any comments you got for me as we go along. But let's start here. NBA insider Mark Stein has revealed that the Dallas Mavericks will likely extend PJ Washington, who will become eligible for a 4-year, $90 million extension this upcoming Friday. And this is not new news. ESPN's also reported this about a month or two ago that the Mavericks are expected to offer this 4-year, $90 million extension to PJ Washington, and he will likely accept. But we will see on Friday if that news will become true. This past season, he played 57 games for the Mavericks, 14.7 points per game, almost 8 rebounds per game, 1 block, 1 steal, shooting about 38% from three, which is very helpful in 32 minutes a night. Uh, I think he's going to be a key piece of how the Mavericks operate. He's arguably the most versatile person on this team outside of Cooper Flag. So, he was somebody, adding Cooper Flag, he became slightly expendable, but, he now becomes a luxury if he's on your roster because you do have Cooper Flag. So, I do think it's a smart move to go ahead and plan to have PJ Washington be a part of this franchise long term, um, because he plays good ball. He plays basketball the right way. Um, and again, he adds the versatility. He can play many positions, he can guard many positions. So good for PJ to get that money locked in. Adds a little bit more confidence when you're not necessarily fighting for your contract. But some people would argue that you might make you a little lazy now you got your contract. But I don't think that's going to be PJ. I think he's going to come in, do what's asked of him, and play winning ball. As part of why the Mavericks got to the finals in the first place when they traded for him that season. So I expect PJ to accept that deal, and I expect him to be a part of the Dallas Mavericks for the foreseeable future. But, a take that I saw, on a Friday edition of First Take, um, Stephen A. Smith, he said it's very clear that with where the Mavericks are at, if AD and Kyrie are healthy and AD brings his A game, the Dallas Mavericks will win an NBA championship. But he does preface the comments by saying that's a big if. He also had his Stephen A's list where he had top 5 NBA players to watch this season, and AD was at number 1. So tying in the fact that, you know, he's putting a lot of pressure on AD's shoulders here on if he can perform at peak level. He does see the Mavericks being in the mix for an NBA title run. Just about 2 years out from the last one. So I do think it's kind of a stretch. I know he does say big if. He does say big if. And I believe in the big if here. I just don't see a world where AD doesn't miss some games. You got to give Kyrie some time to bounce back from his injury. You're not going to expect him to play at peak level right away. He might be able to get there in time for the playoffs. And if you're in a spot, hopefully, where the rest of your roster is relatively healthy, Kyrie comes in and doesn't have to play 35, 40 minutes. Hopefully, he's able to come in after he's off a minutes restriction and really give the proper amount of time at this age coming off of that injury that he should be giving because, you know, like at the end of the day, if they were to even be in the conference finals right now this year, that's a huge win for them. I know they put out there that, they're NBA championship or bust, but and especially around that the Luka Doncic trade getting AD. But really, if you're sitting here after that trade, were you really expecting the Mavericks to be a championship team going into the season. I know I wasn't. I'm not putting that type of pressure on them. As long as you play win a playoff series, maybe win two playoff series this year, I think that's a big win for them. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that I'm not putting enough pressure on the situation. But I'm just looking at the roster, where they're at, where Kyrie's at in his recovery process, and I just think a championship this year is a little bit too much to ask of this team. So we'll have to wait and see as the regular season is coming up fastly approaching. But speaking of that Luka Doncic trade, Dirk caught up on the RCD Mallorca, excuse me, on that one YouTube podcast, and he said, regarding the Luka trade, it was a tough decision. I think the club had to make. I want to support Luka, but I'm also a Maverick for life. So this was a tough decision for me, but I want to keep obviously supporting both. He said, I wish the best for Luka in LA. I think he's going to have a great career there. And of course, the Mavs moved on and now got the number one pick. So I think at this point, both sides moving on and hopefully doing well after. Um, and now you look ahead to having Cooper Flag. Obviously, Dirk mentioned that. And, it's not like you don't have a future franchise guy to be hyped about. And it's not like you don't have a current franchise duo and Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving to be excited about. So, yeah, I still to this day wouldn't have traded Luka. I don't think any smart basketball person would have. But it happened, it's done, it's over. So you now have to sit and say you at least have Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving, and you at least have Cooper Flag. That's that's a decent win in a trade that I don't agree with. That's best case scenario out of all this. So we'll really see if the Mavericks can compete at the type of level that not only like keeps them relevant for these first couple years of Cooper Flag's career, but they need to keep them relevant to where they built a cohesive team around Cooper Flag once you think it's time to move on from Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving. That is the main thing of all this. You know, you have to monitor this situation if you're Nico Harrison of when is it time to get some value out of AD in the market? When is it time to move on from Kyrie Irving? When is it time to put the franchise in the hands of Cooper Flag? It's all going to be interesting, and that's going to be honestly the thing as a Mavericks fan you're going to have to keep your eyes peeled on the most as we go down the stretch here of not just the regular season, but how they perform, once Kyrie gets back will be the major key. But to end things off here on the Mavs latest with some Mavs chatter, Jaron Boslow of the Smoking Cuban kind of brings up the fact that the Mavericks might be in a situation here like they had with Jalen Brunson with Ryan Nemhard, and Ryan Nemhard undrafted, Jalen Brunson drafted in the second round. Uh, and he showed some promise in the summer league as, he had a few games and showed that he has some potential as a pure point guard in the NBA. And where I don't think it's quite like Jalen Brunson, because I do think Jalen Brunson's always been a natural scorer. I also think, you can't undervalue his championship run at Villanova and just the grit that you get from winning a natty in that fashion. So yeah, I don't think they're quite the same players. Therefore, I don't think the situation's necessarily apples to apples. But where the similarity lies is you have to figure out with Ryan Nemhard when it's time to give him the opportunity. And, the Mavericks gave Jalen Brunson the opportunity, and he played well, especially put it on main display in the Western Conference Finals with Luka Doncic. But you have to decide, like you decided with Jalen Brunson, when is time to give him that opportunity, because you have to figure out when it's time to pay him. Now you're in a different spot with Nemhard because he's undrafted to where you have a little bit more wiggle room there you know, when you drafted Brunson, even still being the second round, it's not quite the same. So I don't think they'll be quite in the situation they were in with Brunson to where they have to decide if he walks or not. Where you have a two-way contract situation with Nemhard, you really have room here to develop and decide when he gets a uh, standard NBA contract. So in that sense, that's where the situation between Ryan Nemhard and Jalen Brunson's different. And I don't think the Mavericks really are. It would be really hard for them to mess it up. They would really have to mess this one up in terms of just not giving opportunity, right? I view it like Amani Bates in Cleveland. He's shown every time he's on the court, he's a scoring machine. I just think, there's just something with Cleveland. They got great depth. They just don't have the opportunity for him. And that might be a spot that Ryan Nemhard gets into. And that's when the Mavericks have to decide, do we have to let him walk? Do we get value for him? Or is it time to give him opportunity? But, it's an interesting thought to bring up like, hey, they can't mess this up like they messed up Brunson. Yes, that in a vacuum I agree with. But they're also in a spot to where they have some time to quote unquote mess it up, but they have so much leverage in the fact that he's a two-way player and that he's undrafted that it would really be hard for them to whiff outside of them not just giving him opportunity to be on the court in a regular season NBA game instead of G League games with the Texas Legends. So I love that thought exercise. That's why I brought it up for today's late Mavs chatter. But you know, I just don't think the Mavs are gonna mess this one up with Ryan Nemhard. And again, he's a two-way player. He's not going to see a lot of time this year. But if he does play well in the G League, you have to start then considering when is it time to give him the opportunity. But this has been another Mavs Latest. I'm Josyah Howard. Again, subscribe down below. Leave any comments you got for me down below. And let's get it, y'all.